Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Picture this. You're dying of thirst in Death Valley. Your feet are bleeding. You're hallucinating from dehydration. And hours before you collapsed, you stumbled across one of the richest gold deposits ever discovered in California. But here's the cruel twist. You must choose between the gold and your life. This is the true story of Alec Rami, a French Foreign Legion veteran whose incredible discovery became legend. 50 years later, the man who saved Rami's life is preparing to venture back into that hellish landscape to find what Rami left behind. Welcome to a tale of fortune found and lost, survival against impossible odds, and treasure still hidden in California's brutal desert wilderness. Our story begins in France's maritime Alps, where young Alec Rami herded sheep. But pastoral life couldn't contain his restless spirit. He enlisted in the French Foreign Legion, bound for Algeria's frontier at Fort Sidi Bel Abs. The desert became Rami's teacher, transforming the French farm boy into someone who could survive where others perished. He learned to read the land, find water where none seemed to exist, and push beyond normal human limits. These skills would prove invaluable in years to come. When his enlistment ended, Rami heard of Nevada's silver bonanzas. He found himself in booming Virginia City at the silver rush's height. The town pulsed with energy matching his vivacious nature. Saloons blazed with light. Fortunes were made and lost nightly. Rami mastered mining with Foreign Legion discipline, becoming expert within a year. Then came his first real wealth, a Comstock load lease yielding $30,000 in weeks. For a man who'd never known wealth, the abundance was overwhelming. His gregarious personality attracted swarms of friends, eager to help spend his money. In Virginia City's saloons, he became legendary for wild nights, singing raucous Foreign Legion ballads. The fortune disappeared faster than he dug it up. Undaunted, Rami returned to mining. Lightning struck twice. Another strike, another fortune. This time he tried being conservative, though conservative for Rami still meant spectacular celebrations. But fortune is fickle. His second stake vanished, and unable to secure another lease, he worked as a day-wage miner, routine his restless spirit couldn't tolerate. Like many who tasted striking it rich, Rami made a fateful decision: become a prospector, venturing into unexplored deserts seeking the big one. Years followed wandering Death Valley country, landscape so forbidding it earned its ominous name from 49ers who nearly died crossing it. But the desert welcomed Rami like an old friend. His Legion training prepared him for this harsh existence. During wanderings, Rami befriended Native American tribes, calling this desolate region home. His boisterous personality and Foreign Legion songs made him welcome at campfires, where his entertainment broke desert nights' monotony. These relationships would prove crucial. By 1904, Rami had become a desert rat. Sun-weathered prospectors more at home in wilderness than civilization. That fall, during extended prospecting around the Last Chance Range, Rami's life took a dramatic turn. He made dry camp in promising country. Short on water, he rationed it to his pack burros. One night, driven by thirst, the animals broke their hobbles and disappeared. At dawn, Rami tracked them to vast, forbidding Saline Valley, a 25-mile trough of salt-encrusted flatlands. The burros headed across alkali wasteland toward distant mountains. Ramy couldn't overtake them. Worse, inflammatory rheumatism made every step torture. With only 2 canteens and few provisions, he abandoned equipment and began what he hoped would be a short trek to water at canyon sand tanks. When Ramy reached the tanks, his worst fears were confirmed. Bone dry after months without rain. Now he faced desperate circumstances. Every step sent fire through swollen feet. From memory, he recalled water seeping beneath a boulder in a wash south. It was his only chance. He continued through exceptionally rough country, feet screaming with every step. Then, in cruel irony that would haunt him forever, Ramy stumbled over something that would have made him rich beyond dreams, a protruding quartz ledge containing gold particles plainly visible to the naked eye, substantial amounts glittering like treasure. It was the bonanza he'd spent years seeking, the big one that would have solved all problems. But with his body failing and death stalking him, the gold might as well have been worthless. His need was water, not wealth. Stopping only to break off ore samples, Ramy hurried on as fast as tortured feet allowed. Behind lay fortune beyond imagination. Ahead lay desperate hope of survival. What happened next exists only in memory fragments. Somewhere in that hellish landscape, the old legionnaire's endurance finally reached its limit. As sun sank behind mountains, Death Valley Indians camped near Saline Valley heard something chilling, strange, unearthly sound echoing across desert. At first they believed it was an evil spirit, but 2 young men, Grapevine Duck and Caldmore Jack, recognized Alec Ramy's distinctive voice. They found Ramy wandering in delirium, bellowing his favorite Foreign Legion ballad, his mind gone from heat and dehydration. The next thing he remembered was lying on cool sand while gentle hands applied wet bandages to burning feet. An Indian woman tended his wounds with life-saving care. For 9 days, the tribe nursed the broken prospector back to health, sharing precious water and food. When his feet healed enough to walk, Ramy made a decision demonstrating either courage or madness. He set out across Saline Valley to recover his abandoned animals. The alkali crossing nearly killed him again. Only another Good Samaritan's grace allowed Ramy to survive. Alfred Giraud was a young sheepherder when he found the half-dead prospector and brought him to camp. Giraud later admitted he didn't think much of desert wanderers, usually broke, dirty, and full of wild gold tales. Even when Ramy showed him rich gold samples from the quartz ledge, Giraud remained skeptical. "Gold from the mint meant more to me than specks of yellow in rock," he said. The practical sheepherder preferred discussing civilization's simple pleasures. Despite different outlooks, they became fast friends. Before death, Ramy gave Giraud 1 precious ore sample, plus detailed account of where he'd found it. 50 years passed. Giraud became a successful sheep rancher, developing mining interest only later. That's when he examined the rock Ramy had given him decades earlier. Professional assay results were staggering. The sample was almost half gold, one of the richest pieces ever discovered in Inyo County. Suddenly, his old friend's wild tale took on entirely different significance. Wherever Giraud traveled in Inyo country, he searched for additional clues. In Isabella, he found old Chilean Crisante Santavinas, who had known Ramy and possessed another sample from the same ledge. Santavinas had spent weeks after Ramy's death trying to locate the source, finding placer gold and quartz particles identical to Ramy's sample near Ubahibi Peak. Encouraged by Santavinas's conviction, Giraud questioned every Native American he could find in Death Valley. At the old Indian ranch, he made an almost miraculous discovery. Elderly Stina Duck not only remembered Ramy, she was the woman who had cut shoes from his swollen feet and nursed him back to health. She was wife of Grapevine Duck, one of two young men who found the delirious prospector singing French ballads in the desert night. The circle was complete. Now, more than half a century after Alec Ramy stumbled across fortune and lost it in desert survival's cruel mathematics, Alfred Giraud prepares his own expedition. At his Bishop Ranch, he points to a 200-gallon mobile water tank, water to be hauled 40 miles for this search. "I have greater desire to find Ramy's mine than exploit it," Giraud explains. "It's been a fascinating challenge. Over years I've gathered evidence. I'm ready now." The search centers in Saline Valley, that same arid trough where Ramy nearly died. Armed with decades of research, corroborating evidence and unshakable conviction that this Death Valley lost mine isn't myth, Giraud embarked on a quest that could have solved one of the desert's greatest mysteries. However, he failed in his quest. The gold Alec Ramy found and lost still lies somewhere in that forbidding landscape, waiting for someone bold enough to venture into one of Earth's harshest environments seeking fortune that may or may not still exist. The desert keeps its secrets well, but sometimes gives them up to those who know how to listen to its whispered promises of riches beyond imagination. Picture this. Somewhere in the desolate mountains of Chihuahua, Mexico, beneath 515 carefully measured paces from an abandoned cantina, lies $7 million worth of stolen gold bars. That's $7,019,018, worth over $100 million today. Only 5 people in history have ever seen the map to this treasure. Welcome to Southwest Desert. Today's story has everything: a ruthless bandit with a taste for fake marriages, double murder, a desperate burial under gunfire, and a deathbed confession that created one of treasure hunting's most closely guarded secrets. This is the true story of Pancho Villa's lost treasure and why it might still be waiting for someone brave enough to claim it. Doroteo Arango, better known as Pancho Villa, had earned a reputation as a thief and murderer by age 9. Born in Durango State to a mother of African descent and an indigenous father, Villa fled to the Chihuahua Mountains as a young man and did something remarkable. He organized. Villa gathered a band of adolescent cutthroats, turning his mountain hideout into headquarters for one of Mexico's most feared criminal organizations. As his gang matured, they began raiding villages with a horrifying routine: murder the men, steal everything valuable, kidnap the women. When villages fought back, Villa adapted, developing one of history's most twisted schemes. He staged fake marriages, having followers dress as priests to target beautiful women. Under the pretense of immediate marriage, victims were brought to his hideout believing they were saving their honor through church weddings. Villa's records show at least 47 women fell victim to this elaborate fraud. But Villa's true genius lay in his ability to think big. By 1915, during the Mexican Revolution's height, Villa identified the perfect target: Chihuahua State's gold mines. Chihuahua was renowned for its gold and silver mines, and Villa coveted the crown jewel, the Dolores mine in the Sierra Madre, strategically located near the U.S. border. Instead of crude smash-and-grab tactics, Villa orchestrated something far more sophisticated. Villa's followers infiltrated Dolores as legitimate laborers, becoming high-graders, or thieves who systematically stole during operations. The scheme was brilliantly simple. Workers concealed stolen ore during shifts, threw it over barbed wire fences to waiting accomplices, then transported it to Villa's secret mountain smelting facility under darkness. Villa replicated this across multiple regional mines. By 1916, he'd accumulated a massive stockpile of gold bars at his hidden smelter, over $7 million worth, constantly guarded. 4 Americans worked at Dolores, 3 engineers and 1 doctor. As thefts escalated, two engineers fought back. One stationed himself at the mine exit, inspecting every departing miner. The second climbed a water tank, surveilling the fence perimeter where ore was thrown to accomplices. For Villa's thieves, these Americans were an existential threat. Their solution was swift and brutal. The coordinated assassination struck with military precision. At the mine entrance, an assassin killed the first engineer with a quick knife thrust during routine inspection. Simultaneously, a hidden gunman shot the second engineer from a concealed shed position. The barbarous double murder shocked the American community. Every American in Chihuahua armed themselves while Villa declared death sentences on all gringos in Mexico. An international incident was brewing. The murdered engineers' families wanted bodies shipped to the United States, but the American doctor lacked embalming equipment. Faced with impossible circumstances, he improvised grotesquely, removing viscera, packing body cavities with charcoal, sealing corpses in sheet iron coffins within heavy wooden containers. The resulting coffins required 12 men each to carry, with bearers rotating every mile. 50 Indians transported the bodies on the 50-mile journey to Temasachik, supervised by the surviving engineer. Halfway stood a cantina, crucial to our treasure story. The engineer sent runners to close the tavern, but when Indians discovered it closed, they raged. They threw one coffin over a cliff, broke into the cantina, and became violently drunk. The engineer held intoxicated men at gunpoint while recovering the coffin, continuing the nightmare journey through days of delays. By 1916, Villa's smelting operation had produced over $7 million in gold bars, but his luck was ending. The U.S. government finally awakened to the crisis. General John J. Pershing was dispatched to capture Villa, dead or alive, but Villa retreated to mountain strongholds and waited. The Pershing expedition returned empty-handed, a complete failure. The Mexican government, fearing full American invasion, decided to eliminate Villa themselves. Sensing closing walls, Villa instructed trusted General Jesus Gonzalez to retrieve the gold bars from the secret smelter. Gonzalez selected loyal men and traveled to the cantina area where Villa's smelter operated. Gold bars were hastily loaded onto ox carts, beginning descent toward the cantina and Temasachik Road. But a runner brought devastating news. Mexican government forces were nearby. Capture appeared imminent. Gonzalez made a split-second decision, creating treasure hunting's greatest mystery. The convoy halted at the cantina, the same tavern where drunken Indians had caused funeral chaos. Gonzalez turned east, pacing exactly 515 metros, 39 inches each, not 36-inch American yards. At this precise distance in a small valley, he ordered a trench dug. All $7 million in gold bars were buried at this specific spot. Gonzalez disbanded his men with orders to return to Villa's stronghold. Mexican army arrived immediately, engaging bandits in devastating battle. All Villa's men died except Gonzalez and one Indian soldier. Bodies were piled and burned, evidence still discoverable today. Gonzalez reached Villa's headquarters reporting mission details, but Villa executed the surviving Indian soldier, ensuring only 2 people knew the treasure's location, Villa and Gonzalez. Villa had struck a deal with the Mexican government, a huge Chihuahua land tract and 500,000 pesos annually for being a good boy. He accepted, settling into luxury, drinking tequila, pursuing women, temporarily forgetting his buried fortune. Villa spent government money on elaborate uniforms and made regular trips to Jalapa village in his Model T Ford. At his tailor shop, Villa spotted 16-year-old Maria Villarreal, the tailor's daughter, deciding she'd become his next wife. But Maria was no ordinary victim. When Villa's henchmen brought her and he proposed using standard deception, Maria played along until the crucial moment. During their pre-ceremony embrace, she whispered tenderly while secretly removing Via's gun. Pressing the barrel into his midsection, she ultimatumed, "Bring a real priest within 5 minutes or face consequences." Villa immediately complied. For the first time, Pancho Villa entered legitimate marriage. Maria's father, Señor Villarreal, took a blood oath to restore family honor. He recruited 2 trusted friends, selecting an ambush location, an old tool house beside the only Jalapa road. The 3-man team waited 2 days. Hearing Villa's familiar Model T engine, they opened simultaneous fire with high-powered rifles. The shots literally cut Villa in 2, instantly ending Doroteo Arango's career. Maria inherited all Villa's worldly possessions, except $7 million in buried gold, unknown to her. Villa's death created a leadership vacuum his followers couldn't fill. Internal fighting erupted as cutthroats turned on each other. During one battle, General Gonzalez was shot through the liver. Friends transported dying Gonzalez to Dolores, where American surgeon Dr. Macy had practiced for years. Well acquainted with Gonzalez, Macy performed surgery, but the wound was fatal. Realizing impending death, Gonzalez told Dr. Macy the complete treasure story, providing an exact burial location map. That map became one of treasure hunting's most carefully guarded secrets. Only 5 people have ever seen Gonzalez's treasure map: Gonzalez himself, Dr. Macy, Cy Wills, Brooke Temple, and one unnamed author who documented this story. The district between Dolores and Temosachic remains desolate and dangerous, accessible only by mule or ox cart. Bandits continue infesting the area, creating significant danger for treasure seekers. But true gold bugs tend to believe $7,018,018 are worth any risk and discomfort. If you would like to contribute to my channel, join my Patreon community and discover my art print products on my website in the links provided in my description. Also, if you would like a particular image from my videos, give the timestamp for the image, and I will upload it to my website and Patreon. Thank you. Deep in the shadowed canyons of southern Arizona lies what could be the most extraordinary treasure never found. Not gold or silver, but something far more incredible. An arsenal of ancient weapons that would make the world's greatest military museums weep with envy. This is the story of the lost Papago Arsenal, a tale of one man's incredible discovery, a secret guarded for over a century, and a mystery that continues to tantalize treasure hunters today. The year was 1882, and Arizona Territory remained a wild frontier. Bancroft, a seasoned prospector who had arrived from New Mexico in 1874, had established mining claims near Covered Wells, about 50 miles south of Casa Grande on what is now the Papago Indian Reservation. But it wasn't gold or silver that would make Bancroft's name echo through Arizona history. It was a discovery so remarkable that adventurers still search the desert for proof today. On that fateful day, Bancroft was traveling his usual route between Casa Grande and his claims through the Santa Rosa Valley. Unusual rock formations several miles to the west caught his experienced eye, weathered surfaces different from the surrounding landscape, promising mineral deposits. Every prospector knew that odd geological features often meant hidden riches. For several days, he picked his way through the rocky outcroppings, searching for ore. Then, as he climbed higher among the rocks, something extraordinary appeared, something that had no business being in this remote corner of the Arizona wilderness. Rising from the desert floor was a rectangular adobe building, 40 to 50 feet long and 15 to 25 feet wide, its walls intact despite decades of brutal desert conditions. But what made Bancroft's pulse quicken wasn't the building's preservation. It was its obvious intentional concealment. The only entrance was a 3-foot square opening, carefully sealed with loose rocks and adobe, camouflaged so expertly it would be invisible to anyone not standing directly in front of it. Bancroft was a prospector to his core, and curiosity drove him to remove the stones and hardened mud blocking the entrance. Finally, the opening was clear. He took a deep breath and squeezed into the darkness beyond. What he found defied every expectation. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Bancroft found himself in the most incredible weapons cache on the North American continent. "There was the greatest sight I ever saw before or since," Bancroft would later write. The building was an arsenal, a carefully organized, meticulously maintained storehouse of firearms spanning centuries of military evolution. The weapons were arranged with museum-like precision. Rows of forked wooden sticks held rifles and muskets so none touched the ground. Along the walls, wooden pegs supported at least 100 different types of pistols, their metal still gleaming despite obvious age. There were Old Queen Anne's, muskets dating to the early 18th century. Old Jaegers, German-made rifles prized for accuracy. Old Hawkins, firearms carried by mountain men and early settlers. The collection included flintlock mechanisms of every description, shotguns and rifles representing nearly every major manufacturer produced in Europe and America. Most incredibly, some weapons appeared to be of Spanish origin, suggesting they might have been carried by conquistadors. "I think Cortez had when he invaded Mexico, or Coronado might have brought them to this country," Bancroft marveled, realizing he might be looking at firearms that witnessed the birth of European presence in the New World. The arsenal contained what Bancroft estimated to be at least 1,000 individual weapons, a collection that would have equipped a small army. As Bancroft stood transfixed, completely absorbed in cataloging the weapons, he suddenly realized he was no longer alone. 2 Papago Indians had discovered the disturbed entrance and quietly positioned themselves between the prospector and his only escape. For a heart-stopping moment, Bancroft understood his curiosity might have sealed his fate. Trespassing in such an obviously sacred location could easily be considered a violation worthy of death, and he was trapped with no possibility of fighting his way out. Fortunately, the prospector had spent enough time in Papago country to be recognized by the tribal members who caught him. His years of respectful interaction with local people likely saved his life. The Papago men allowed him to leave unharmed, but their message was clear: this place was not for outsiders. Days later, Bancroft found himself in conversation with John D. Walker, one of Arizona's most prominent mining operators running the profitable Vehicle mine in Papago territory. Walker was married to a Pima woman, spoke Papago fluently, and was widely regarded as one of the few white men who truly understood the local tribes. When Bancroft described his discovery, Walker's initial reaction was skeptical disbelief. How could such an enormous cache exist without his knowledge, especially given his close tribal relationships? But as they discussed the discovery, an elderly Papago man quietly listening in the store spoke up. In halting English, he confirmed that Bancroft's arsenal did indeed exist, exactly as described. The old man's testimony transformed Walker's skepticism into amazement. "You must lead a charmed life," Walker told Bancroft. "If any other white man ever got in there, he didn't live to tell about it. I've heard about such a place for a long time and have asked several Indians to take me there, but none of them will." Walker's words carried particular weight because of his unique position. If someone with his connections and respected status among the tribes couldn't gain access to the arsenal, it suggested the location was protected by the most serious cultural taboos the Papago people could devise. The existence of such a weapons cache might seem impossible, but historical records provide compelling evidence for how the Papago could have accumulated such a collection. First contact with European weapons occurred in the late 1600s through Spanish missionaries and soldiers. The 1751 Papago Pima uprising against Spanish colonial authority resulted in numerous skirmishes where many Spanish weapons fell into native hands. Throughout the 1800s, the Papago continued conflicts with Spanish and Mexican authorities, raids that netted horses, cattle, and additional firearms. Most significantly, during the latter half of the 19th century, the Papago became allies of the United States in the war against Apache raiders. Territorial authorities actively armed Papago warriors with modern rifles and ammunition to protect settlements and trade routes. This alliance meant the Papago had legitimate access to current military firearms for several decades. Combined with weapons acquired through centuries of previous conflicts, these could easily have formed an impressive arsenal. The cultural context supports Bancroft's discovery. Anthropological studies document that the Papago traditionally cached native weapons, clubs, shields, and bows in caves and rock shelters near enemy territory. Building a special structure for valuable firearms would be entirely consistent with established cultural practices. Father Bonaventure Obliser, a Franciscan priest working among the Papago since 1910, possessed unparalleled knowledge of tribal traditions. When consulted about Bancroft's arsenal, he admitted never hearing of such a cache but stated, "I think there is a good chance one exists." Father Bonaventure pointed to a specific crisis in the late 1870s when tensions between the Papago, Pima, and white settlers escalated until Arizona Territorial Militia was called from Prescott to prevent imminent war. When militia arrived, they found tribes appearing peaceful with no visible weapons. This suggests the arsenal might have served as a hidden staging area where weapons could be quickly concealed when military forces appeared, then retrieved if conflict became unavoidable. Today, more than a century after Bancroft's discovery, the lost arsenal continues capturing imaginations and inspiring desert expeditions. Despite systematic investigation of numerous odd-looking rock formations and conversations with Papago tribal members, no trace of the adobe building has been found. This absence doesn't necessarily disprove Bancroft's account. While dry climate might protect metal weapons for decades, adobe construction is vulnerable to freeze-thaw cycles and flash floods. If the building existed, roof and walls may have collapsed, adobe gradually melting back to earth. Even after decades underground, iron and brass weapons would likely survive in dry desert conditions. Modern searches face challenges Bancroft never encountered. Federal law prohibits trespassing on reservation land without permits, and the Papago Tribal Council has exclusive authority over archaeological activities. Anyone seeking the weapons cache must obtain official permission and agree that any discoveries belong to the Papago people. Picture this. You're a farmer in Texas, working your cotton fields along the Red River, when your plow suddenly strikes something hard. You bend down, brush away the dirt, and there it is, a rotting canvas bag filled with gleaming $20 gold pieces from 1894. Congratulations, you've just discovered one of the most famous lost treasures in American history, worth potentially $500,000 today. This isn't fantasy. Somewhere near the confluence of the Red River and Little Wichita River in North Texas, $10,000 in gold coins, the equivalent of nearly $300,000 in today's money, lies buried just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. It's been there for over 130 years, hidden by desperate bank robbers fleeing for their lives across the Texas frontier. Let me take you back to a spring morning in 1894 to the dusty streets of Bowie, Texas, a growing frontier town in Montague County with exactly one bank, and that's all four strangers on horseback needed to know. The quartet of men had ridden into Bowie before dawn, positioning themselves casually near the First National Bank like they were just waiting for business hours. Nothing suspicious about that, except these weren't customers. They were predators and they'd done their homework. When the bank manager arrived to unlock the doors for another day of frontier commerce, the four strangers simply followed him inside. Picture the manager's shock when, once inside the safety of his own bank, guns suddenly appeared in the hands of his customers. "Fill the bags," came the cold command, and canvas sacks were thrust across the counter. The terrified manager complied, stuffing the bags with everything in the vault, $10,000 in gleaming $20 gold pieces, plus another $18,000 in paper money and other currency. $28,000 total. To put that in perspective, the average worker in 1894 made about $400 a year. These men had just stolen the equivalent of 70 years' wages. But here's where their perfect plan began to unravel. Two bank employees arrived for work, walking straight into an armed robbery in progress. Panic seized one of the robbers. A gun discharged. The employees dove for cover, and suddenly the quiet morning erupted into chaos. The robbers grabbed their partially filled money bags and bolted for their horses, but the gunshot had awakened the town. Armed citizens poured into the streets, and what followed was a running gun battle through Bowie's main thoroughfare. In the crossfire, an innocent townsperson was struck down and killed, turning a robbery into murder. Remarkably, all four criminals escaped unharmed, spurring their horses north toward the Red River and what they believed would be freedom in Indian Territory. Behind them, within an hour, an armed posse had formed and was thundering in pursuit. The robbers weren't running blind. They knew exactly where they were going: Rock Crossing, a well-known ford across the Red River about 25 miles north of Bowie. Cross that river and they'd be in Indian Territory, a vast, lawless region where federal marshals were spread thin and outlaws found sanctuary. But nature had other plans. When the four desperate men reached Rock Crossing that evening, they found the Red River swollen with spring rains running at flood stage. The water that should have been their salvation had become an impassable torrent. Faced with a choice between certain drowning and possible capture, they made camp in a grove of cottonwood trees on the Texas side of the river, planning to wait for the water to recede. It was a fateful decision that would create one of America's most enduring treasure legends. That night, around their campfire, the criminals made a practical choice that would haunt treasure hunters for generations. They divided the paper money among themselves, lighter and easier to carry if they needed to scatter. But the gold? Those heavy $20 pieces stayed in their canvas bags, too cumbersome for individual flight. Unknown to the desperate fugitives, their presence at Rock Crossing had been anticipated. The Bowie marshal, thinking like the criminals, had contacted federal authorities stationed in Comanche, just 25 miles north of the crossing. Federal Marshal Palmore and his men were already positioning themselves on the Indian Territory side of the river, waiting. Dawn brought both hope and terror. The river had dropped slightly overnight, though it remained dangerously high. As the criminals prepared for their crossing attempt, one of them spotted something that made his blood run cold: a dust cloud on the southern horizon. The posse from Bowie was closing in. What happened next took only minutes but would create a mystery lasting centuries. Realizing the heavy gold would doom them in the treacherous river crossing, one of the robbers grabbed a shovel and frantically dug a shallow hole near a large tree close to their campsite. The canvas bags containing $10,000 in $20 gold pieces disappeared into the earth, covered hastily with dirt and debris. There was no time for proper landmarks, no careful mapping of the location. The posse was within shooting range, and it was now or never. The four men spurred their horses into the raging Red River, and what followed was a desperate battle against nature itself. Multiple times, both horses and riders vanished beneath the muddy surface before fighting their way back up. The current carried them far downstream from their intended crossing point, but somehow, miraculously, all four men and their mounts reached the northern bank alive, where federal marshals were waiting with drawn guns. Exhausted, soaked, and surrounded, the bank robbers surrendered without a fight, but their capture was only the beginning of the treasure story. Marshal Palmore recovered most of the stolen paper money from the criminals' saddlebags, but the gold was nowhere to be found. Under interrogation, all four men maintained complete ignorance about any missing treasure. They'd rather face the gallows than reveal the location of their buried fortune. The journey to trial at Fort Smith, Arkansas, known ominously as Hell on the Border, took several days overland. During those long nights around the campfire, something unexpected developed. Marshal Palmore struck up a friendship with the oldest of the four criminals, passing time with card games and conversation. Night after night, Palmore would probe about the missing gold. Where had they hidden it? What had they done with $10,000 in $20 pieces? Each time, the elderly outlaw would respond with the same knowing smile and conspiratorial wink, never saying a word. Judge Isaac Parker, the infamous hanging judge, showed no mercy. All four men were sentenced to death for armed robbery and murder. After weeks in the dark cells beneath the courthouse, pale and weakened, they were led to the gallows. 13 steps led to the execution platform. As the second prisoner was being prepared for his appointment with eternity, the elderly criminal leaned close to Marshal Palmore and whispered something that would launch decades of treasure hunting. "The gold," he said quietly, "is buried under a big tree near where we camped." Then, true to form, he gave one final wink before stepping forward to meet his fate. Palmore now had the information he'd sought for months, but his duties as a federal marshal kept him from returning to Rock Crossing immediately. When he finally made it back to the Red River, he faced a daunting reality. The crossing area was dotted with numerous campsites among the cottonwoods, and he'd never actually seen where the criminals had spent their final night of freedom. Armed with only the vague description, "under a big tree near where we camped," Palmore began a systematic search that would consume years of his life. He'd return whenever duty allowed, selecting promising campsites and digging around the base of large trees. Trip after trip, excavation after excavation, but the treasure remained as elusive as smoke. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had the word of a dying man, arguably the most honest moment in the outlaw's life. But the Red River country had too many big trees and too many former campsites to search them all. Today, more than 130 years later, treasure hunters and researchers have developed sophisticated theories about the gold's location. The leading hypothesis points to the area near the confluence of the Red River and Little Wichita River, where extensive cottonwood groves match historical descriptions. But here's where the story takes a modern twist. Much of the riverside woodland that existed in 1894 has been cleared for agriculture. Those $10,000 in gold coins, now worth potentially $500,000, might lie just inches beneath someone's cotton field, waiting for the right plow, the right day, the right moment of discovery. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for another Southwest Gold story. Check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists on historical tales, legends, lost gold stories, and adult bedtime stories. If you like a certain image from my videos, tell me in comments and give timestamp. Happy trails! Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.